Okay, I will share my screen now. Let me know if you see.
Yes, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, hi everybody, this is Rafael, and today we are going to talk a little bit about end-to-end testing with Cypress. So, for people who born in 90s, is the left side of Cypress. That's the joke. Yeah, about the agenda for today is just to have an initial point to start talking about automated tests. We are going to read a little bit about the meaning of automating of tests, the test pyramid, and what is Cypress, and how can we take some advantage of using this kind of tools. So, okay. About the meaning of automating tests, it is basically to use some tools to run test cases. I think this is one of the pretty simple definition of automated test. And in a comparison of manual test, that maybe is a little bit obviously, the manual test requires some person in front of our computer executing the test cases carefully and step by step. But when we are thinking in automated test, this doesn't require the human intervention during execution. This is just only a concept to have a initial point to start about to start talking about the automating test. That actually Cypress is a tool for automate test cases. And this is I think, some interesting chart about the test pyramid. This concept came from Michael Cohn, that is written in his book Succeeding with Agile. It is a chart that showing how many, maybe an example of how many tests, automated tests, we can require in a different kind of levels of testing. For example, the bigger amount of automated tests maybe we will have is the automated unit test, and in the way where we are moving up in the pyramid, we are requiring a little bit less automated tests or each of the layers. For example, maybe we will need a little bit more unit test than UI test. This is the only, I think, pretty important idea about the test pyramid. And finally, what is Cypress? And according to the description showing in the Cypress web pages, that Cypress is the next generation of front-end testing tool built for the modern web. When you are using Cypress, you can write a different kind of automated test like end-to-end test, integration test, and unit test. And in the web page of Cypress say that with Cypress you can test anything that comes in a browser. Actually, I had the opportunity to be working with this tool in different projects based on, for example, in Angular, in React, some web forms on .NET or MVC solution, and in all of them we can easily implement Cypress for the end-to-end testing and things like that. And so when we are thinking in automated tests, maybe Cypress is not the first tool that comes in our mind when we are thinking in automated tests. There are a lot of different tools. Maybe one of the most famous tools for automation is Selenium. And there we can see a little comparison between Cypress and Selenium. I think one of the most important differences between them is that Selenium is based on a WebDriver, and Cypress actually runs into the web browser without the need of use a kind of web driver like in Selenium. And there are another differences that you can see here, like the supported languages and kind of browsers. The frameworks to, for example, show the testing reports and things like that. You can see there is just a comparison between another useful tool for automating tests. Now, takes hands-on tool to see some examples when we are using Cypress. Let me show you. Okay. To install Cypress is very easy. Actually, we just have to execute this sentence in the CLI. You will need have installed Node.js from the version 12 and above, I think. Yeah, it requires Node.js from the version 12 and above. And it can run in Mac, Linux, and Windows. And yeah, you just have to skip npm install Cypress in the CLI, and it will be installed in your local environment. Okay, I have installed Cypress in my PC. And Cypress provides a UI tool, pretty cool to see the list of tests that you have written here and execute each of them. The command to open this tool is npx and Cypress open. It will take a couple of seconds. And here, yes, this is the UI of Cypress. This is some pretty basic application. You can see here all the tests provided in your solution. I have some examples that came with in Cypress when you install Cypress. And I have provided another kind of example for this session. Okay, let's see a little bit about the code. Cypress runs in the web browser, so you can select elements in the DOM with the pretty similar way that you can select elements using jQuery, right? For example, when you are trying to get an element by its ID, you can use this, how to say, the hash, or I don't know how to say that sign here. But for example, when you are trying to get an element using the class name, you can use point or dot and the class name. And you can select with this sentence the element that you are trying to get from the DOM. And you can execute different kind of actions in each of the elements on the web browser. For example, if you are getting, for example, here a input, you can introduce text with the sentence type when and passing as a parameter the text you are trying to type in that input, and then execute some kinds of hazard like validating if there have a kind of value. For example, it is the same value that you are typing in this control, and this is the asset. Actually, you can execute some user action like executing a click. You can see here, you get an element like a login button, then click. And with the UI of Cypress, you can execute each of these test cases just clicking on the test file. Then the Cypress UI will open a browser where you can see how it's executing each of these test cases like this. I will click on this test. Then it's opening a new browser, and it is executing each of the steps here. And you can see in the right side the behavior of the web browser when it's executing that test cases. So you can see here, for example, each of the steps are executed in the test case. For example, it is getting a element with the class action email, then type the email and execute the asserts. All of these steps are provided in the test case file. And finally, you can do the same thing that of executing each of the test cases, just clicking on the file. And I will explain a little bit now example of, for example, trying to log it in a solution. This is the code that I have provided for the login in. The first step that we'll be executing on each of these test cases is visit in the web browser this URL. This is a URL for login page. Then I'm going to validate the input classes. For example, I will get the email input, then validate it as the right class. Same case with the password input. And in other test case, I am trying to validate error messages. For example, introducing a right email, but with a wrong password. And the application will show a error message like this. And finally, in another test case, I will validate the successfully logged in the application and to use the right email is a right password. Clicking on the login button, then I see in the application a welcome message. So let me show you how it works. Then I'm going to the test list and select the login test cases. You can see here how it is working on the login page. And that's it. So we can review here each of the steps. And when we are moving the mouse over the steps, you can see in the right side how is highlighted each of the controls that are selected when the test is executing. Also, you can see something like a snapshot of the application when each of the steps are executed. For example, in this case of validating the error messages, in the step of type the email, you can see how in the right side, how the application looks when the user is typing the email address. The same case for the password is this is how the application looks when the Cypress is executing this step on the test cases. And finally, we can see here the selected element for validating the error message. And actually it's passing the test case. Okay. And we may have another a little bit more elaborated scenario. For example, when we are trying to introduce more kind of data in a form like this. For example, in this test case, the user will log in the application and create another user. The application test says that the user is logging in here. Then get the element of the menu name settings. Let me show you. Is this element. Then click on the add button. It's something like this, add user. Then is getting different kind of inputs and typing information on each of these elements, like the first name, last name, email, phone number, and finally select this element for a role of the user. That is this step. And finally clicks on the submit button that is in the bottom of the application. And you can see finally in the browser, each steps executed. And the last result is the user is created here. So another way to execute automatically the test cases here is in a headless way, because you see we have opened a Cypress UI tool for executing each of these test cases, but we can also execute all of them in a headless way. We use this command and the Cypress run, and it will execute all of the test cases here without opening a web browser. Actually, it will be using the Electron environment. It is not a kind of web browser. It's more like a environment where the test cases can be running without a browser to execute each of these steps. So you can see here in the console how it's executed and the result of each of the steps of the test cases. How many time is taking each step and the results. You can see here. This maybe it can take a couple of minutes. And when you execute the test cases like this, you may have a different kind of outputs. I think that's very interesting feature because you can have a video record of the executed test and some screenshots of how the test cases were executed. And that outputs are here. But maybe it's required to end with all test cases. Just wait a couple of minutes. Okay, I can see an example here, for example. So the last time when the login inspect was executed, this record, Cypress saved this record about the test execution. So for example, if some errors were reported when the test cases were executed, you may take the video and see again what was happening when the tests were executed. and see step by step what occurs in the test execution. Also, let's see if the sending. Yeah. It also takes some screenshots. For example, you can see the test cases executed here with the miscellaneous spec, and it is saving a screenshot about what occurs in this test case. So I think that is a very good feature of using Cypress. I don't know if, for example, with Selenium, when you execute something automated in Selenium, you may have this kind of outputs that I think is very helpful for the developers in order to, for example, when you are trying to figure out how to reproduce a kind of issue reported in the test results. So I think this is a good help for us. So I think this is all that I was trying to show you about Cypress. This is very easy to integrate in pipelines in Azure. Maybe this is something that we can take in another session because it's something that takes a little bit time for configure in Azure pipeline, but it's very easy. Now, if you have some comments or questions now?
I do have a question, Rafa. So is the application that where you are running the test, is it an MVC application or is it an Angular application?
Yeah, this is a Razor Web Pages application. Actually, it's a solution where I'm working on with the client in Sympath. Yeah, this is a Razor Web Pages application.
Have you tried on, let's say, Angular applications or React applications?
Yeah.
I'm asking this because on Angular, all the DOM is dynamically rendered. So I wonder if it works the same.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I had the opportunity to be working with Cypress with Angular application, and it works pretty well. Yeah, I understand that about the front end is dynamically created, but that's Cypress has a behavior very close to what the user does in front of the web. So if the user maybe is waiting for a response from the server to showing a view, Cypress will be waiting for that response before doing each of the actions that maybe the user will do when he's in front of the solution. So yeah, it's working. Cypress works pretty well with technology like Angular, React, and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, somebody else? Okay, so if there are no more questions, I just want to say thank you, everybody. And that's all for now.
Thank you, Rafa. This is very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafa.
Thank you. See ya.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Rafa.
Thanks, Rafa.
Thanks, Rafa.
Thank you. See ya.